And I'm going to let you just give a quick warm welcome before I tee up our special guest here, and then we'll get going.
Excellent. Yeah, it's so exciting to all be together here for our final Resiliency Summit as part of our update of the Colorado Resiliency Framework. We've been working hard together, so I want to thank you all. If you have participated in previous engagements, we've done a lot. And your input has shaped this plan. So we are excited to share where we're at in our draft planning process. You'll still have input opportunity for input and shaping this. So we're excited for the dialogue and collaboration that we've built in and listen to your input for that. So thank you. And for those that are new, welcome. And we look forward to the next couple hours or so.
Love it. Thanks, Anne. I'm excited to kick off this meeting with a colleague of mine and also a good friend. And if you know him, he's a good friend of yours too. That's the way that Ernest House Jr. moves in the world. He leads the Center for Indigenous and Tribal Engagement for Keystone Policy Center. We're gonna drop his bio into the chat, but Ernest, it's long, so I can't read off all the things that you have done in the state of Colorado. But I do have a story I want to share with you, which illustrates exactly the ridiculousness that is Ernest House Jr., which is we were working together on a project at the Capitol, the Property Tax Commission, and we're sitting in the old State House chambers. And if you know it, it's this beautiful space, stained glass windows, and we're kind of chatting. I'm still getting to know Ernest, and I look over and I catch his eye looking up, and I was like, what are you looking at? He's like, oh, well, that's my great grandfather up there. And I was like, that's your great grandfather in the stained glass of the Capitol, and you're great, and right there in your office. And turns out Ernest's great grandfather was Chief Jack House, who was the last hereditary leader of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, and just follows a long lineage of incredible leaders in Southwest Colorado and the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. So Ernest, that is the most Ernest story I could think of, which was classic Ernest. So with that, you need no other introduction, but we would love to hear from you. Go ahead, Ernest.
Oh, Trace, thank you so much. If you ever need a hype person, Trace is the best hype person out there. So you should definitely look into that. First and foremost, I've always start out with saying Mike the Guban the Woyak. That means hello, my friends in Ute. Um, I'm so honored when Trace reached out and asked if I'd be interested in just providing some comments and welcome to you all and to the Colorado Resiliency Office in general, and you and your team, the work that you all do, and then the folks, the partners from around the state. It's a huge honor, and I just wanted to really, first and foremost, just say thank you as a former recovering state employee for 12 years under the Owens, Ritter, and Hickenlooper administration. I know what it takes in state policy and the work that you all do in coming up and developing the Colorado Resiliency Framework. I had a chance to just kind of browse through it, and it's really amazing. There's a lot of great information
So it looks
there.
like it's more.
Okay, I'm
Oh,
gonna bring my pen. So it looks like it's from you.
So yeah, so it's not, so it doesn't
is
look like
that?
it's just.
Oh, I think we're able to got it. And so the one thing I wanted to just share with you all, as you go about this summit and thinking about the work ahead, I want to encourage you all that this November is American Indian Heritage Month. And I think that as you all look at how the resiliency work looks in working with tribes and indigenous communities, obviously every day is important. Every other, all the other months are important. And I think the more and more I talk about our tribal communities today, I talk about the importance of land, water, and community. And I think those four areas of focus that are laid out in the framework are so important. I think the biggest thing, the biggest impact that I see, and I do work with Keystone and our Natural Resources Office. I see Julie Shapiro here joining, is, we have projects from Steamboat to the San Luis Valley to Durango to Grand Junction. Um, And so much is wrapped around the climate impact that we're seeing in southwestern Colorado. I was born and raised, I'm a member of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. I still have a home about 10 miles from the Utah border down a remote canyon called McKelmo Canyon in Montezuma County. That's on the Ute Mountain Reservation. And there's so much of what I'm seeing in our tribal community that's impacted by climate. If you'd have told me that our tribe would have had a climate impact plan released, if you 5 years ago, if you told me that 10 years ago, I would have not believed you at all. And I think that because we're seeing the impact of drought on in southwestern Colorado, but in particular in Mancos Creek and Mancos River on the Ute Mountain Reservation, we're losing um, cottonwood trees that we've always had access to, and they're really important to a lot of our cultural ceremonies. And now to the point of we're actually having to look in other locations around the state to do that. Chokecherry gathering, medicinal plants. The list goes on and on. But I think it's so important even now that the tribes are starting to look at partnering with more and more state agencies, with more and more NGOs around how to combat climate impact and put in more climate resiliency planning. Um, Earlier this year, in April, Department of Natural Resources, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, GOCO, others released the Colorado Outdoor Strategy. And if you haven't looked at it, it's something I've been talking about, which is the tribal framework. There's a handful of us that worked on this, pulling this tribal framework together. It took about 3 years to meet with both Ute tribes, elders, youth. We talk about boarding school impact at Fort Lewis College. We give examples of wildlife crossings on Highway 160 between Pagosa and Durango on the Southern Indian Tribe. The biggest thing, though, it's an 80-page document. I encourage you to check it out. But if you have just a minute, I would just I think one of the biggest impacts of that document is at the end. It's the frequently asked questions. It's the hurdles. How do I work with a tribe? I don't want to say the wrong thing. I've emailed so and so. I've emailed Ernest 50 times and haven't gotten anything back. Like, how do I keep building relationship with tribes? What do I do? Am I doing something wrong? There's steps in there to help kind of go through something that we hear all the time. And we also know that there's a capacity issue, at least in my tribal community. I'm the first to say one person is doing 20 different jobs. And the funding and obviously the federal funding impact, we know there's a big budget deficit at the state, understandably, and also local government. There's huge challenges. Everyone's having challenges. And so I think we're continuously trying to figure out ways and mechanisms to help both support indigenous communities, but then work with them, not work ahead of them, not work behind them, but how do we do this in a lockstep? And so I encourage you to check out the tribal framework. It's focused on outdoor recreation. It's focused on wildlife and natural resources. But the issues there, they can be adapted into all the conversations you're having around housing, around climate impacts, around social inequalities across the board. And I would just encourage you, even as you look further into that, if you might be able to look at maybe what an example of working on tribal communities, and you can put that, and maybe you've already highlighted in the framework. There consistently still needs is a over 200 person waiting list in my tribal community for a home. Chaffa has been really amazing about this. I know the Colorado Resiliency Office has been a part of the conversation about this. Um, and when I talk about land, water, and community, I think when we talk about water, clearly the Colorado water issue and the deadline that hit yesterday around tribes and states and tribes in upper basin, lower basin is a big focus. When I'm thinking about water, I'm thinking about the water to my community, and the needs currently right now. Yes, there's the 10-year, 20-year, 50-year conversations that we're a part of, but there's an active conversation right now going on with Lake Nighthorse and Durango and the needs for Southern Ute and Ute Mountain. I encourage you to check that out, and I encourage you just to reach out to the tribes. The great resources down there. If you're driving through, passing through, if you're like me, spend a lot of time on Highway 285 and 160, a lot of windshield time. If you have a couple hours of downtime, the Cultural Resource Center at Southern Utah's one of the best, Ute Museum in Montrose, and just a way to just find more resources, a way to support our communities, indigenous communities, and also here, the indigenous community in the urban area like Denver. City of Boulder's doing some great work around wildfire mitigation, around parks and open space. So there's a lot of examples out there. And I still think Colorado, we're a bit of an island, but we continue to be a pro-indigenous state. And it's the work that you all do to continue building that partnership with tribes. Again, thank you for the time. Thank you for the work that you do. And I hope that you have a successful rest of your summit. Again, if we can be of any resource, if we can be of any help whatsoever, please, Trace knows how to get a hold of me at Keystone and the work that we're doing and the examples. And so thank you again for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ernest. Always a treat to hear from you and appreciate your advocacy and the work that you continue to do. I see a request in the chat for you if you have time before you leave. But otherwise, I'll move us along. I also said there's a rumor about how long it takes Ernest from drive from here to the Ute reservation. I'm not saying what the rumor is. I just know that if you see a big truck flying down the highway, that might be the best way to get a hold of Ernest House Jr. So. But like Ernest said, a lot of partnership opportunities. I want to give a shout out also to the CRO office, who's continues to work on this tribal engagement across the framework. I know that you have been working with the folks at CCIA, attending the AIAN organization meeting in the fall quarterly meeting, and also having conversations with tribal and leadership around what they'd like to see woven into the framework. So this is a part of that. And Ernest, really just appreciate your willingness to just come and share your personal thoughts, but also thoughts on behalf of a lot of folks uh, would like to share as part of this process. So thank you for being here. All right, y'all. We're gonna move on into the rest of our summit. Marguerite, looks like I'm gonna hand it over to you. I'll go ahead and share slides, and then we'll get going.
Hi, everyone. Marguerite Harden. I'm the Senior Resiliency Manager on the Colorado Resiliency Office team. And it is my delight to be able to introduce a little bit more background about the Colorado Resiliency Framework on the next slide. So recognizing that not everyone is familiar with the CRF or the Colorado Resiliency Framework, I'll just tee us up a little bit more. This is our third framework. This is our second update. Our first was in 2015. And this image here on the right is from our 2020 framework, and it's not changing. It really captures our approach to resiliency really well here in Colorado. The inner circles are overlapping sectors that we take a really holistic approach to resiliency. And these interconnected sectors are all a part of the scope of the Colorado Resiliency Framework. And we see that those sectors being really embedded within the themes that you see around it. First, there's that triple bottom line of social equity and unique community needs, economic vibrancy and diversity, and instead of environment, it's risks from natural and other hazards. And we see all of that as being force multiplied, those impacts on the sectors and these themes as being force multiplied by the impacts of climate change, which really is that outside circle. So the Colorado Resiliency Framework takes that holistic lens and is a statewide interagency plan that outlines strategies and actions to make Colorado better prepared for the future. And so we have a very interagency approach to developing the strategies that are draft that you will be seeing today. And we're really excited to dig into them more. So on the next slide, where are we in this update process? Well, this, as Anne said, is our third of 3 summits. In between those summits, we've had a lot of roundtables, focus groups, meetings individually and in groups in order to get to the draft strategies that you're going to hear today. We've been meeting with local governments, Colorado-based organizations, our partner state agencies, and many individuals to get to this point. So we've synthesized a lot of that feedback, and we're going to discuss today where we are. And on the next slide, what is in this update? Well, we did previously share the primer that is about to get dropped into the chat. I would encourage you to use some split screens, potentially follow along as we go. This draft of our strategies includes 15 different strategies that build resilience and then we provide example actions within those strategies. So it's not all of the actions. We have a lot more work that we are still finalizing, but we are giving you some things to react to today. And some of these actions are going to be really specific and others are really broad. Which we think is important for a 5-year plan. These draft strategies are key opportunities for agencies to advance progress within each resilience priority area. And so you can see in green here the 5 priority areas that we're going to dive into briefly today. And on top of those 5 priority areas, there's a few overarching areas that we're going to talk about as well. So we're going to be sharing a snapshot of these areas. And with that, I am going to pass it back to Trace for a little bit of an interactive activity.
Cool. Thanks, Marguerite. So yeah, we'd love to hear from y'all real quick. I'm gonna put up on the screen, and once you're in this, know that you don't need to exit it. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this. Kirsten, what's up?
Oh, yeah. I was just noticing there was a great question in the chat we might want to cover before we move on, which is that I think it's Kai was asking if we could speak a little bit more just about the origin of the framework, maybe before we get into this.
Sure.
Hopefully everyone can hear me too. It sounds like Kurt lost sound. But I'm happy to provide a little bit more of background. So in 2012 and 2013, there was some catastrophic flooding and wildfires here in Colorado. And that encouraged Hickenlooper to launch what is now called the Colorado Resiliency Office. And so we created this framework in 2015. That was the first Colorado Resiliency Framework. And it really set the stage for all of our resiliency work. It was an award-winning plan. And so then in 2020, we updated that plan. And that update really came around a time of, George, the George Ferguson protests, the George Floyd protests, the 2020 wildfires. And so there were a lot of social and natural and climate related impacts that we were facing. And then today, here we are 5 years later, we continue to update this framework and we really focus on the gaps and the issues that really require complex collaboration with that cross-sector and holistic approach to resiliency. So it's a great question, Kai. Hopefully everyone is in the Menti now, and I see some already entering their top priorities.
And we'll wait a little bit. Partnerships, funding, climate, community, trusted leaders, equitable access, social capital. Excited that partnership, community, and resources is coming in strong because that's what we're hopefully doing today, is building that muscle a little bit. Anybody want to share out voiceover, top of mind for you? What kind of inspired the word that you're sharing here? Just come off mute if so. Would love to hear from folks. Okay, Hannah Payne, you're first on my screen. What'd you share? Where are you in Colorado?
I'm actually not in Colorado. I'm in Utah, but I work for the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, who
Cool.
led the North Front Range Climate Resilient Communities Accelerator in the Denver to Fort Collins region over the last couple of years. Worked with a couple of folks on this call.
Did these themes
My
track with
supervisor
the
did.
spaces you're
They
in?
do. I was gonna say that I think that the resources, funding, partnerships, and especially a data piece has been really popping up for a lot of the communities that I live in and work with right now. So I'm seeing that jump to the forefront and would agree with that from my perspective too.
Appreciate that. Scott,
Yeah.
Scott Simkis, where are you in Colorado and what'd you share?
Oh, hi, good everybody. I shared multi-jurisdictional collaboration. I don't know if it made it there yet, but that's what we're working on here on a project in Superior. We're trying to build a small demonstration microgrid post wildfire, and then connect that grid to other jurisdictions in the area that were impacted by the fire. So it's a great demonstration of economic, wildfire, human, and housing resiliency.
Very cool. Thanks, Scott, for sharing. Gloria, would love to hear from you. Looks like Gloria Cat.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, this is Gloria. So I wrote community voice. I think it's really important to really capture how the residents that are being affected by climate change or social issues, that they're part of this effort as well.
Yeah, love that. And Gloria, where are you located?
I'm located in Fort Collins.
In Fort Collins. Okay, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all for sharing. Again, a lot of overlap that I'm seeing here, which is interesting, and a lot getting at what we're hoping to build today. So I'm going to keep us moving. So with that, Marguerite, I'm going to hand it back to you to jump in.
Perfect. Thanks, Trace. So again, you're welcome to follow along in the primer. I'm going to introduce us to this topic of strategic growth and land use. So each of these priority areas, strategic growth and land use being one of them, has three strategies. So we have 15 strategies across five priority areas. And the first one is around technical assistance and really making sure that we can enhance technical assistance for land use decisions to ensure we're balancing development and preservation of vital landscapes, but also while we're doing that, reducing exposure to hazards and adapting to changing conditions. So that's really integrating that resilience lens into current strategic growth opportunities and making sure we're doing that with technical assistance. And I'll get into a little bit of actions, but first let me move on to align processes, which is that second strategy. We really want to make sure that state processes do ensure local infrastructure investments are aligned with growth objectives. So that's a lot of interagency state work. And then that third strategy we have within this area is to encourage future water policy decision making is aligned with community objectives and resilience best practices. So we've heard a lot about the need for water, and we have some more specific actions coming out of that. But to illustrate some examples of actions that are coming out of this priority area, I wanted to highlight our first strategy, technical assistance. This first action is really around developing tools, including communication tools that convey the value of resilient land use decisions. This action actually started out as creating a one-stop shop of tools, but we heard from a lot of participants that the real value is going to be in creating new tools, and not just tools, but also communication strategies. How are we talking about resilience? How are we capturing those benefits? What are those best practices? Can there be scenario planning around that? And so we think there's a lot more we can do in this space. And we also heard that it isn't just about tool creation, because the tools are only as good as the use that they get. And so we also heard for this second action example that we really need to pair that with providing human support capacity for navigating these resources. And that might include ensuring that we are facilitating regional collaboration for regional entities, not just local jurisdictions, to be doing that work. So with that, there's some more interaction where we're going to have you actually prioritize each of these three strategy areas.
Yeah, and would love, again, I think the primer here that I dropped in the chat is going to be most helpful because this language is pretty limited. You see some dialed in examples, but we're really kind of counting on you all. A lot of y'all have been in these conversations, but for those of you that might feel newer, that primer is going to be really helpful to help you understand what the difference is between the technical assistance, aligning processes, and encouraging water and decision making. And we're going to do this across um, all the different priority areas. So with that, and again, keep your Minty up in a separate thing because we're going to keep moving and keep using it. So with that, we're going to go to a quick poll. So which strategies among those three within strategic growth and land use feel most urgent and important to advance? So this is a priorities question. What's the thing that's top of mind for you? And rank those for us. And I can see my number at the bottom. So far I've got 8 folks, 9 folks. And I think, Marguerite, I'll be curious to just kind of hear once we see where this kind of lands, how that reflects into the conversations you've been having around the prioritization. So just kind of curious, and then maybe we could hear from a person or two as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's interesting because we went into our engagement into the first summit without really having water be a specific focus area. And we added this strategy around water-oriented decision making because of everything that we heard around it. And so interesting to see it really coming up on top. I would be curious to hear anyone who's ranking water-oriented decision making as the top priority, why, and what else you might be interested in there.
Perfect. And Shell, you're making a good point for us too, which is at the top of the slides. Oh yeah, Becky, thanks for putting that in there. At the top of the slides when the polls come up, if you need to get back into Menti for any reason, the info's there. Libby, go ahead, jump in.
Well, just thinking about the water-oriented decision making, I think it's really hard right now to think about where we're going to be in 5 years, especially like thinking about some of the drought implications that some of our communities are facing. Oh, and I'm from northwestern Colorado, calling in from Steamboat. But working with some folks in Larimer County, and they just have a draft water management plan and working with agricultural producers, thinking about the implications of that plan, and that it's unclear how long those decisions will be made for setting policy today for the future and not having realistic understanding of what we might be looking at 5 years from here.
It's an awesome point. I also see fire-oriented decision making dropping into the chat, and that's a great segue into the next slide once we get there. But first, I'm curious to hear from Cindy.
Yeah, boy, I did the water encouraging water oriented decision making as my top priority too. And just to try to get to the point of it really quick, that agriculture is where new water supplies seem to be approached. And that's also where we are losing the most land to development is agriculture. And so Colorado is the biggest loser in the country as far as rate of agricultural land lost. And a lot of that comes from municipalities and industries going to buy, and it's all above board, but that's where they go to get water resources. And so it's a big risk for food access and for the food economy in Colorado. So it's a priority for me, and it starts with water.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Cindy. And yeah, Libby, Cindy, I love it. I love the interaction here and kind of the thinking that you all are sharing. I'm gonna move us on, Marguerite, if you're good. Okay. And these poll results will be shared out as well with folks, but gonna keep us going. Resilient critical infrastructure. Who's that? Who's jumping in for it?
That's me. Hi. Hello, everyone. Julia Masters. I run a microgrids grant program with the Colorado Resiliency Office, and I've been leading some of this work around resilient critical infrastructure. So, the three larger strategies that we've really captured during these discussions are at the top here: integrating resilient design, enhancing cross-agency engagement, which is a little bit less relevant for this group, and then kind of expanding and supporting resilience hubs. For those who don't know, a resilience hub is a trusted community space. Think like a library, a town hall, a rec center that functions both during emergency and non-emergency times. And during emergencies, they often have backup power and can support via communications and other emergency support. And during non-emergencies, they're a trusted space for community to go. So I think I'll start with this Resilience Hub action, which is, earlier we heard from, I don't remember who was from C2ES, but she was mentioning the North Front Range example of that accelerator where the communities, I think it was from Denver to Fort Collins, all really came together and built out a vision for a Resilience Hub network in the Front Range. And so while that is still ongoing and that work is still kind of playing out. The results of and kind of learnings from that were certainly echoed in these conversations. So really enhancing that shared understanding of what resilience hubs are and the state being able to support with resources, best practices, examples to help local planners really develop those. So that's something we're really excited about. And then the other piece around resilient design, this really touches a lot of different topic areas, including the strategic growth and as well as mitigating risk to hazard, but really just making sure that local communities and other folks doing infrastructure projects are able to tap into those best practices and perhaps even have an incentive to do so with some of the state, technical assistance and funding that is available. So those were some of the exciting pieces that kind of came out of resilient critical infrastructure. And I think I will pause there. Back to you, Trace.
Great, thank you. So again, primer gives you additional context around these three, but same thing. We're driving, as you know, we're driving towards these breakout rooms to really get in to some of this connecting we want to do, but we're going to kind of go through each of these with this polling. So with that, going to get us into the polling for this piece. Which strategies feel the most urgent and important to advance within resilient critical infrastructure? So those three that Julia just talked about. And last time, I think we were missing like 8 people's responses. We had like 38. We'd love to see the full gamut of folks responding here. And if you have any thoughts as folks are sharing, Julia, kind of curious, as you see a little bit in a little bit, we've only got like 15 people right now. But kind of curious if you're surprised at what rises to the top, and then also curious if anybody else wants to jump in with thoughts as we're going through this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the resilient design piece is it's so broad, and when we were doing these exploratory conversations, it was kind of hard to grasp because it touches so many sectors, and whether it's the grid, whether it's water infrastructure, whether it's transportation, like each agency at the state, each jurisdiction is kind of thinking about those things perhaps in more silos. And so something that has really come out of our conversations is how can we kind of present some of these infrastructure projects as having co-benefits, as really building on best practices in a variety of sectors, regardless of if it's just a water infrastructure project, it may have cascading co-benefits as well. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
Cool. We'll wait and see. We'll do like one more minute on these.
Cool.
Got about 10 people left.
Yeah, and the engagement with utilities, excuse me, is huge. And the grant program I run mostly grants directly to utilities, and so the state has really increased their relationship building and kind of transparency through that. But really orienting towards utility input, I think is a big piece as well.
All right. Appreciate that. All right, we inched a little closer, 40 out of 47, not bad. All right, up next, we've got resilient critical, no, mitigating risks from hazards. Who's that?
That is I, Trace.
My
Hello,
friend
everybody.
Matthew. Go ahead, Matthew.
Thanks, Trace. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Matthew Jacobs. I'm the Recovery Program Manager on the CRO team. And this priority area focuses on mitigating risk from hazards. And just to reinforce the overall goal of this impact area, it's to reduce risk from all hazard by integrating science, equity, and local capacity into proactive mitigation, planning, and disaster recovery. And you'll see these 3 broad strategies above. And just as Trace reinforced, that we do have that primer to go a little bit more in depth detail. But just to kind of walk the dog on some of these to give a brief description is the first one really looks and prioritizes enhancing understanding of prioritization of hazard risks in disproportionately impacted communities in order to direct resources to the greatest needs. We really heard a lot of good feedback on understanding what are some of the best approaches, data tools, integration of data, prior so that communities can better understand where their gaps are, what the risks to hazards are, and better understand and build trust with the communities to provide those resources. So one of the actions below that as an example, I want to highlight is really developing an information clearinghouse. So there's so many resources out there. And at the federal level, there's been a lot of data tools that have changed, some that have gone away. And there's a lot of awesome efforts, even within Colorado, to better understand hazards and demographics and equity. So really looking at providing, simplifying and really helping provide maintenance and best practices for when do I use what tool to help with my community planning and hazard mitigation? And how can we strengthen and integrate that data within the state of Colorado? Not mentioned here, but an implied task with this is creating that committee of experts to go in and collectively review this and create this and then see where it will be best posted for best use. I'm going to move on to integrate mitigation and NBS or nature-based solutions into planning. So really strengthening that level to integrate technical assistance across a lot of different efforts at the state to support communities with hazard mitigation and having that community planning effort and also this overlap to strategic growth that Marguerite mentioned, that community planning, that comprehensive planning, driven also and connected with hazard planning as well. And then we have a lot of tools and best practices and case studies that we can continually learn from, share out, and effectively communicate down to the local level. And that leads me over to strengthen local ability for mitigation. So this is where some of the first two actions really like how do we help translate that into strengthening that ability for a local community to adopt these best practices, to effectively communicate with each other, to peer learn, especially in an environment that's constrained by more limited resources and capacity. One of the things I want to highlight right now, below you'll see a picture, is Colorado recently adopted a wildfire resiliency code. And to help strengthen that networking, one of the approaches we've taken is setting up a peer exchange to connect local governments to share what's working, what are similar interests, what are similar needs. Some of these approaches, innovative approaches, may look at regional and jurisdictional models, as we've heard. So really taking those two and innovative approaches to get best practices out there and adopt them in that current environment.
Thanks, Matthew. So with this, I'm going to go to the similar prioritization question for mitigating risks from hazards. Would love for you to weigh in. What feels most urgent and important to you in your context, your local context, your statewide context, whatever context you're coming from. And Matthew, same thing. Would love to hear kind of broader reflections. Of course, we only have a few folks so far, but as this sort of gets closer, and if anybody wants to come off mute and share a little context for what you're thinking about, what you're wrestling with as you answer this, let us know. But this is interesting for us to see, and this is really helpful, I think, as the framework takes shape. Lisa will go first, and then Abby, or sorry, Libby.
Hi, sorry, I'm trying to turn on my video. Hi, I'm Lisa Hughes, and I'm a local Firewise lead up here in Louisville. I'm also a Marshall fire survivor, and I also work for a small nonprofit that helps people navigate homeowners insurance after disaster. I was on the long-term recovery group for the fire, et cetera, et cetera. And I just wanted to say that, and thank you, Matthew, for the presentation. It's lovely to see you. And I feel like even though I could only pick one, that a lot of these are really important. I feel like the data part that Matthew mentioned is really important. And also the sharing of that data amongst municipalities, groups, whoever is involved in the ability to mitigate risks and hazards. I mean, that's something we discovered on the long-term recovery group was the inability of us to access data from other places. And it was a big problem. So I think that that's great. And I hope that, part of that directing resources, like he mentioned, is the data sharing. But I actually picked the strengthen local ability for mitigation. And I know we don't really have a lot of time to talk about that right now. And I've gone to a couple of these and I did the survey, but I missed one. But from a resident perspective, I feel like this is something that's really important. I mean, I feel like I'm kicking and screaming, dragging my community into the 21st century regarding hazard mitigation, slowly but surely. And I feel like somebody mentioned the multi-jurisdictional planning or whatever. I think that's really important, and also how the state is going to help strengthen this local ability and what that's going to look like. Um, I think that's really important just from a resident perspective, and how those municipalities are going to be able to then turn that around into helping residents strengthen that ability amongst that community too. So that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, Lisa, I appreciate that. And thank you for being here and sharing your expertise and your lived experience with us so vulnerably. So thank you for that. And low-key, I kind of hope you're in my breakout group because I'm like, oh, I want to hear more about that. Okay, Libby, go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I would especially say, like after the federal shutdown and seeing how local communities responded to SNAP um, lack of availability or the shutdown of those programs, realizing that as we kind of move forward in the current climate, that hazards and risk and fires are just the potential for those to grow outside capacity of state and federal jurisdictions to manage and like coordinate. I just increasingly see this need at the local level to be able to quickly respond no matter what it looks like.
Thank you for that. I saw somebody else's hand up, but not seeing it now, so I'm going to move us on. All right. We are going to go next to resilient and affordable housing. Anne, is that you?
It is, yeah. Um, so across the state, people are working hard to address their housing concerns, and they look different in different communities. So rural communities on the Eastern Plains are faced with challenges, maybe of abandoned buildings, and whereas other areas, the supply challenges look differently. So where to find safe land to develop and meet diverse housing needs. So there's great work happening already, local level, state level, and this priority area is to take that work and really bring a resilience lens into clearer focus. So what that looks like in terms of these draft 5 strategies, and the first one is resilience standards. So what does that really mean? We've heard Matthew reference the Wildfire Resiliency Code. So that's an example of how do you build to be resilient to wildfires that are part of Colorado's natural environment. We have to live with that, whether it's extreme heat, whether it's hail. So that's kind of what captures that. And then how do we share those tools and best practices broadly? So whether you're a homeowner or tenant or a developer, you'll have those at your fingertips. The next is on really that kind of disaster preparedness and recovery. So are we ready if unfortunately a big disaster comes and hits a community and has a lot of housing damage? Are we prepared with creative solutions to move quickly to recover resiliently, build back better, and more rapidly? And I'll provide an example shortly about what I'm excited about, some opportunities there. The third one is innovative housing models, and that's kind of our Office of Economic Development and International Trade, OEDIT, has a whole innovative housing initiative where they're helping seed factory built like modular construction. So that's a great way to build supply and create jobs. And so that's another area. It's also looking at maybe some more creative approaches like community land trusts that build in long-term stability and affordability. So that's that one. Increase diverse housing. This is what every community is working to do, is to have housing options and supply that meet different people's needs, workforce needs and family needs and folks that can age in place. And different sizes of housing. So it might be accessory dwelling unit through so that is dealing with standards and technical assistance and sharing funding tools, et cetera. And then the final one is really building off of preserving existing housing. and whether it looks like weatherization programs where you have resiliency benefits and you save money on your energy bills. So lots of co-benefits. And also looking at insurance attainability and affordability, and the benefits of some of those resilience standards. So that's an overview of these 5 strategy areas. The examples that I'm going to share with you is around resilient standards. So, one of the actions is to consolidate resilient housing standards and best practices and share it broadly. There is some interesting, some good information already out there with this Colorado multifamily affordable housing electrification hub. It's a mouthful. And that's coming out of a partnership and hosted with the Colorado Housing Finance Authority, or CHAFA. And what they did is recently add some additional information around understanding climate hazards. What are some building strategies to reduce risks? And what are some case studies where this has happened? So this example is a project, multifamily project in Summit County that really built in wildfire resiliency code improvements. And so you can learn more about that. So perhaps we could expand and build off of something like this so it is more accessible to lots of people. And then the other example I'm excited to share is this kind of related to the modular housing or factory built housing. This image is taken from the Fading West website, and they're a modular housing factory in Buena Vista. And they recently were partnered and were asked to provide modular housing for the disaster recovery efforts in Maui and then in the LA area after the Palisade fires. So this is an example that we could, that is creating jobs again, like I said, and meeting rapid housing needs after disasters, and also the pre-disaster just housing supply. So with that, I'll pause and turn it back to Grace.
Cool, thank you. All right, so on the polling for this one, there's more to choose from here. So again, what strategies feel the most urgent and important to advance within resilient and affordable housing? And we'll give this a couple minutes. And there's some interesting questions in the chat too, so maybe if you have a minute while folks are polling to just jump in on the chat.
So yeah, on the housing insurance issues, it really encompasses all of this housing area issue. I think we put it under preserving housing, but it really applies broadly.
For the microwave hilarious. It's like RV style. Got about half the folks, so we'll give it another minute.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to see the resilient standards kind of coming up to the top, along with just diverse housing, so foundational. And I think, we can do both at the same time. I think there's always a little bit of some tension sometimes around, this idea that resilient standards is going to add all these costs. And there's a lot of high impact, low cost design standards, defensible space, and just even putting some simple vents, mesh on your, attic vents. So things like that, so to prevent embers from getting in and starting a fire inside your attic in the house. So
all right, we're gonna give it like 30 more seconds.
We got it.
This one had more choices.
We had a hard time getting this to 3. That's why, because it's so big and there's a lot happening. So yeah, thanks for the input. And
you're like, we had a hard time getting it to 3, so we didn't. Kirsten, go ahead.
We may still yet.
Yeah. Is it Kirsten or Kirsten?
Oh, I think somehow your name is not Kirsten because, but Kirsten got her name got copied over. So hello, welcome. Yes, please ask your question. Tell us your real name.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. What is your name?
It's Jerry Curry. Nice to meet
Oh,
you all. I'm
Jerry,
not
Jerry, I
sure.
didn't recognize you.
Yeah,
You
I have
didn't
the hat on.
disguise here for a minute.
Sorry for yeah, for some reason I got invited through that Zoom for whatever reason. Anyway,
Oh,
it's Jerry.
gotcha.
I lead the Marshall Rock, which is the Marshall Fire Long-Term Recovery Group. Ann and I are very familiar with one another. And I think on the resilience standards, obviously that hits a note in terms of, how different types of housing, and I threw that into the chat. But I think we're on the resilience standards, if looking at that, it is really the outreach piece of that as well. So I think where there's a miss is that all of these resilience standards kind of get built, and then the homeowners have no idea where to go to really better understand who actually can tell them. And again, the authoritative voice piece, right? And I think even that happened in the recovery from Marshall Fire, and Lisa would share that as well, is that people were just inundated with information about how to be resilient, how to mitigate, and da 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 da. And it's you get to a point where you're not sure who to believe, right? And because some of it is, and so if that was done as part of the pre-planning as well, in kind of that preparedness piece, that not just mitigate post and kind of in the circle, I feel like that is really where there's a gap on the standards piece of it as well. And it goes without saying, I believe there's a huge gap when it comes to the smoke standards that still don't exist. So that's another piece.
Thanks, Jerry, for sharing. Did I spell your name right? All
Yeah.
right. You just uncovered for me. I was like, why are so many Kirsten Taylors joining this meeting? I was like so confused. I thought it was a glitch. So I guess some link that Kirsten shared. So if your name is Kirsten Taylor and your name is not Kirsten Taylor, if your name on Zoom is Kirsten Taylor and your name in life is not Kirsten Taylor, please change your name with the three dots at the top of your square and rename yourself. Is it Kai? Am I saying that right?
Yes, Kai.
Yeah, go ahead, Kai.
Okay, yeah, in terms of resilience standard, I'm always pro resilience standard as kind of a climate resilient expert person. I think the looming question for me is sort of, since you have this under affordable housing, I think the question of affordability is a constant thing that comes to mind because, these are investments that you have to make, whether at the household level or at the community level. And so, where is the incentives are going to come from? Is where's the funding is going to come from? And as homeowners, they're dealing with a bunch of things, right? If you own a property, it's a bunch of things. So you're asking homeowners or property owners, to invest in another level of resiliency. So really understanding the benefits and also whether can you get discounted on your insurance. Is an incentive to take these actions. Yeah, and then the second thing is in terms of resilient standard, I constantly like asking like resilient to what, right? So in Denver, we are talking about drought resiliency, heat resiliency, wildfire smoke resiliency. Can you have these multiple benefits in one place when you are doing these things, because construction takes time and it's kind of a pain point for a lot of people who have to do this. So yeah, I just want to add those two things. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kai. And I think you gave it away, but are you in Denver?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Ken, go ahead, jump in.
Right. Coming in from Boulder and on resilience standards, I'm a multi-decade now. I don't know how that happened. Worker in climate resilience. And my only caveat to resilience standards is that they often land as top-down, state-derived directives that are, aren't necessarily clear. I think we've heard some comment around that, where they came from. Some of them may seem conflicting. And largely it has to do with starting at the local planning and, working from the bottom up, which is much better way to work on climate or any resilience issue, and perhaps some way to socialize and integrate these better. The resilience standards with that local perspective would help integrate them into planning. Over.
Yeah, Ken, and I appreciate that. That's kind of what this process has been, is that socializing piece. Because I think, we've talked a lot about that. Colorado is a local control state, and that is a very layered thing in how things move around, how things work or don't work, that sort of thing. So it's been interesting as being the third and what will later today be the fourth summit of these conversations to help shape this up. In addition to the experts, the state agencies, all those sorts of things that are running those agencies, but really trying to like actually hear from the folks, the boots on the ground, like you're saying. So really appreciate you being here and being part of it, kind of hopefully exactly what you're describing, albeit an imperfect process, but knowing that that's ultimately what we're trying to drive towards. So appreciate that for sure, for sure. And anything to add there before we move on?
No, I mean, these all resonate, so I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. Thanks, y'all. All right, we're gonna move on then. Um, Economic resilience. Who's my friend on economic resilience?
Hey there, everyone. Keiki Bear. I'm the Rural Prosperity Manager. Um, the economic resilience section has three strategies that have been rising to the top. The first is around workforce skills and pathways, but this one's really focused on the future. So what disruptions and changes are coming that we should be preparing for in our K through 12 curriculum, post-secondary curriculum. Of course, planning for AI and automation. And then this last one, which is really focused on what I think of as kind of the core of economic resilience in this state, which is small business and rural economy support. And what can that look like? I'm going to highlight two actions for us quickly here. The ones that I picked are ones that are very community serving, which felt extremely important to me. They are still really broad, and so this is the space in which we're excited to innovate and create with our communities to help figure out what these will look like. Interestingly enough, I was on a really interesting webinar yesterday that brought up two ideas in relation to these, which is that we should be talking about AI often in our communities, even when we don't necessarily know what it's going to do to our economies, what it might do to our workforce, because the more we talk about it, the more we stay on top of that, the more we start to own that narrative in our communities, particularly true in small communities that might be more impacted by some of these shifts. And the second one was about rural economies, which was that rural economies might be moving into an era where the kind of traditional attraction and retention kind of mode of economic development may be becoming less useful to them. And what might be really useful is starting to move into this really place-based unique assets, the things that make our rural economies special and really amplifying those pieces. And so both of these actions are kind of in line with that. The first one is how can we help at the state hold some regional conversations with partners such as local governments, industries, economic development organizations to start to talk about what the potential impacts of AI are, where there are opportunities, where there are challenges, again, to continue to stay ahead of that so that it's not majorly disruptive in the moment. As well as this develop economic development strategies that focus on unique place-based assets, connectivity, that really highlight the things that make our Colorado communities special. Now, this one is really open-ended. So this is where we're really leaning on all of you. This could look like a playbook, workshops, the implementation of these actions, we're really looking to make them be as useful to you as possible. So that is where there's a lot of space in this conversation and where we really value these conversations. So I will leave that there.
Great. Thanks, Kate. All right, with that, I'm going to move us into the polling for economic resilience. What feels most urgent and important? And if anybody has any thoughts, or Kate, if you have any reflections as these kind of come in, definitely welcome that. And we've got one more after this, which is really just tying this all together with some overarching strategies. And then we're going to spend the rest of our time in breakout groups doing exactly what I think Ken was kind of getting at, which is that connection and implementation arm of sharing best practices, what's working, what challenges do you have, how can we support one another across the state. So excited to get into that.
Yeah, I want to say thanks to Libby. You're right. Yes, focus on entrepreneurship is definitely a key of this. This one that reads business support is actually really more about business entrepreneurship support and kind of rural economy support. So that is an action that we have in the primer around entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and Kate, I'm seeing Kai's question around workforce skills. What did that really come up as?
Yeah, that is a very important question. So what we're really focusing on is changing climate conditions, ability to handle natural disasters, technological shifts, and how we build in to, again, school curriculums, but as well as apprenticeship, trade programs, on-the-job training programs. Part of that strategy is actually about starting to identify some of what those skills look like. So that's our first action within that one is really working to survey and understand where those opportunities are to then build to them.
I'm curious if anybody can speak to the tension that maybe you feel with the workforce skills and pathways of the planning for AI automation. And maybe I'm curious if anybody, I don't know, how you're thinking about that. Or Kate, how maybe you've heard people think about that, the difference between the two, the alikes. There we go. Ken.
Always happy to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to AI, I think it's not actually in conflict with work skills and pathways ultimately.
Yeah.
I think it's supportive, particularly for those of us who find suddenly to wake up and we're a little bit older than we were before. I think we bring a lot of knowledge and skill to what often produce, AI, which can often produce malinformation. So just bringing some knowledge and background to that. But I don't think you have to be older. I think it's good for all folks, as long as we get comfortable and learn about it and what it does. Over.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Ken. Thank you. Megan, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is it's AI in job finding is almost becoming more difficult. Like it's like you have to play the game and plug the right word, otherwise you get kicked out of ATS. And so it's almost going back to knowing someone at that organization or knowing someone who can vouch for you, and those community connections are still kind of coming up as more important, because now with AI people can apply for a job by like clicking a button if they already have a profile. So some employers, you hear like they're getting 1,000 applications for one position, and working like with the workforce center, there's a lot of people that they get their feedback from a job they applied, they're like, sorry, we didn't even get to you. So it's becoming, quite difficult. But the other thing that I just want to point out, I just moved back from Florida. I was doing a stint of work down there. And what we see often, like when these natural disasters come through, is how many people, their job literally doesn't exist because of the disaster. So they lose their employment because the hotel they worked at or whatever, and so is, no longer operational. And so thinking along those lines of being prepared for what type of a disaster could take jobs away, and how you can like reskill or upskill very quickly it becomes extremely important. Otherwise, you have people with no income and sometimes no housing.
Yeah. Megan, at first, before you clarified that you work in workforce development, I was like, Megan, you looking for a job? Because you're like,
Actually, I am.
okay.
Yeah, I moved back. Like I just
Well,
moved
throw
home,
it in the
and I'm in
chat.
but I'm just like, I'm obsessed with all of this stuff. So just really
Yeah.
happy to be here, and eventually I'll find a way to get back a paycheck, but I'm surviving at the moment. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, throw
thanks.
it in the chat. This is a community here of folks that are working out, rowing, hopefully in similar directions. So
Awesome.
appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah. All right. So, Craig, go ahead. And then I'm going to move us on to the last one so I can get us into breakout rooms. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the AI. Here, we're in the San Luis Valley,
Yeah.
six-county region, and we're hosting an AI meeting. A speaker's going to come in and talk about it. to business leaders, government leaders, and so forth. And it's such an issue. We had to change the venue today, literally the meeting's tomorrow, and we had to change the venue because so many people RSVP. We have local governments who just will not allow employees to touch AI. And so there's a huge need there. Business interests have signed up as well. So I just wanted to express that we're seeing it, at least down here in Southern Colorado. It's a huge need. People don't know yet how to handle it. Is what it appears. So we're trying to address that.
Greg, I really appreciate that comment. I'm so glad you guys are doing that. I think you're ahead of the curve here because I think this is why maybe this ranked last is a little bit of a surprise to me because I think people are either ready for it or afraid of it. And so this is where we wind up with like, what do we do with it? So this is our first step as to like how we start to have those conversations, then maybe figure out where the resources should be.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thanks, Craig, for that example. All right. We're going to move on to the last one, and then we're going to use the rest of our time talking to one another. Last one, my friend Kirsten over there, the one and only Kirsten Taylor on the call. Go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, y'all. I'm Kirsten Taylor. I'm the Resiliency Coordinator with the Colorado Resiliency Office. And I want to talk briefly about our overarching strategies. And so these weave in key priorities like building human capacity and focusing on adaptive funding and resources. And these overarching strategies are intended to be cross-cutting. They're key opportunities to extend the impact of strategies and actions across all of the other priority areas that you just heard about. I do want to stress that these are, like everything else, still rough drafts, and we're really going to use the ideas that surface in today's collaboration session to continue improving them and surfacing additional possible actions. The first strategy really focuses on improving and continuing an existing program called Future Ready State Agencies that the Colorado Resiliency Office runs. And this program helps state agencies increase their resilience and prepare for change. And so again, we need our state agencies to be resilient if they're going to be able to support others as well. And this program helps achieve that. Another really clear theme that we heard in engagement, you might be excited to talk about it today too, is concerns about funding gaps, particularly as federal funding has shifted. And so given how there is also resource scarcity at state and local levels, a key strategy is finding ways to be efficient and creative with existing funds while ideally attracting more. And so thinking about, how can we make the funds that we do have go a lot farther? Can we structure projects so they produce multiple benefits at once? Again, extending the impact of those funds. And our final strategy focuses on expanding the state's tools, resources, and technical assistance to advance resilience actions. And so you've probably noticed either in the primer or this presentation that numerous strategies and other priority areas focus on improving technical assistance. We recognize that's really crucial to being able to support other entities like local governments in advancing resilience in the way that feels best for them. It could also include, this is an action example we wanted to highlight, things like developing communication resources that can convey the impact of and really the compelling case for lots of these resilience actions. This surfaced through our engagement. We know that resilience is complex. It can be challenging to explain. There are just so many pieces to it. And so being able to share information, help other entities share information with the public about, kind of what is the overall impact, what's the return on investment, fact sheets about these different initiatives can really help build public understanding and help build the case for a lot of these initiatives. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to you, Trace.
Cool. All right, we got one more poll for you. Curious, where do folks land on this? Kirsten, I'm curious. I'm not shocked.
I am also not shocked. I
Okay.
think, one of the things that we've heard very loudly and clearly throughout the engagement process is that in many cases and ways, you really do need funding in order to accomplish stuff. We know money gets stuff done. So I'm not surprised that's the first one that comes to the top. And so I'm really curious, and I guess I would challenge us today when we're in those breakout rooms, if people have ideas for how, like, what are ways that we can get really creative? Again, what are ways that we can make existing funds go farther, extend the impact more effective? Because I think we heard very clearly the desire for more funding. And the reality is that there are just so many projects and there are limited funds at the state level too. And so I think the more we can be creative about ways to fill those gaps differently through partnerships, we're open to ideas for that.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to move us out of this poll. Appreciate this, folks. So with this, I want to jump into, we're going to spend the rest of our time up until just a couple minutes before so we can come back and close. When we surveyed folks, we heard a lot that like this idea of community, networking with partners, networking with folks that are doing similar work across the state, similar communities, different communities, what's working, what's not working, what are your best practices, what are your lessons learned, what opportunities do we have to shape technical assistance together and separately. And so we want to put that, that in and of itself is a form of resilience, right? Like, um, we hear the funding piece at the top, and we know that it's time to get creative with the current realities that are facing each of you and your roles and your organizations and your agencies and your towns and your cities. And so we want to be able to help connect you all. So our goal for the next 40 minutes is to just get out of the way, to help structure the container around conversations around these key things, and hopefully help you actually answer some of these questions. And so I'm gonna hold on one more. Am I still presenting? Yeah, I am. So I'm gonna get into these last two. Here we go. Sorry. So the first half we're gonna talk about sharing, and these kind of like overlap. Sharing local practices and building partnerships, and then building capacity and connection for community resilience. I'm loving this has already been happening this whole meeting. Y'all are dropping ideas in the chat, making connections, offering connections, being like, you should check this out, you should check this out. That's what we want to happen. And we know that y'all do that naturally, but we also know that it's hard to get folks together. So with that, like I said, in the spirit of getting out of the way, Kirsten has created, I think, 3 rooms. We've got about 20 folks in each room, or 15 folks maybe in each room at this point. We're going to jump into those and we'll kind of lead you with some prompts, but it's really time to hopefully come on to your camera and dig in a little bit with your peers. And we will come back about 5 minutes before 3 to just close it up and send you on your way. All right? So with that, Kirsten, kick us in. And thank you all. Julie's back, Anne's back. All right, I think we're all back. Does that look right? Okay, cool. Okay, so with that, gonna close us out. Anne, I think this is you. Do you want to talk through kind of these next steps, and then let's get folks out on time?
Yes. So, hey, thank you so much for showing up here and many of you being engaged throughout the whole planning process. So I took a lot of just like kind of sharpening our pencils as we really go and fine tune some of these ideas that we shared with you today. So we're right now in the stage where we've got some internal drafts. We're just track changing and it's still a little messy. So what our next steps are, as you saw in that time frame earlier slide, is we're going to be putting together some of the actual draft and vetting it internally. We'll have a publicly available version of like the cleaned up pretty framework, probably not until February because we're not there yet. Like I said, we're still doing the work. So look for that if you all are on our list, so we will communicate that with you. Please share your feedback and give us some thoughts about not only did this meeting do what we said we wanted it to do, and also if you have additional feedback as you have some more time to go through that primer document with the ideas listed. So it'll just take a couple minutes. I think there's a couple questions there. So that is really the main points we wanted to share. And thank you again for being resilience champions and hopefully partnering together to help us do better to meet the challenges that we face in the state and really be future ready. And kudos to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Seeing some resources in the chat for ways to stay connected. Thanks, Marguerite, for dropping in about the LinkedIn community, Colorado Resiliency community of practice. So join that if you haven't already. But we will be in touch again on all the things. And the website, as Kirsten mentioned, is that the everything from today will be posted. So we'll be following up on next steps. And thank you all for joining, for participating, for jumping in. Appreciate you, and y'all have a great rest of your day.